Without further ado, it is my extreme pleasure and honor to introduce Congressman John Lewis.
Mr. President, Chairman of the Board of Trustees, members of the Board of Trustees, members of the faculty and staff, members of the student body, parents and friends, and you, the class of 1994. I am honored and delighted to be with you on this very special occasion here at the University of New Hampshire. I want to thank you for inviting me to be here. This class, you look so good, so beautiful, and so wonderful. First, I want to congratulate those of you who have distinguished yourselves in the quest for academic excellence. Such academic preparation will serve you well as you take your rightful place as participants, as leaders in the efforts to enhance the dignity of man. My friends, you, the class of 1994, you were not the only ones to have learned, grown, and changed in the past few years. This has been one of the most dramatic and moving periods in human history. We have seen nations rise, and we have seen nations fall. We have seen all humanity arouse, including the long-suffering and exploited people throughout the world, the homeless, the toilers, the underfed, the underpaid, and the unlearned. In South Africa, we have seen a great and historic turning point in the struggle for freedom, for democracy, and for self-determination. Last week, I visited South Africa during the historic inauguration of President Nelson Mandela. I came away convinced that South Africa can teach the world a lesson. That is how you can build a truly multiracial democratic society. During the civil rights movement, we spoke a great deal about building an interracial democracy in America. I think South Africa has taken a great leap down that long road toward the building of a society, as Mandela has said, free of racism and free of sexism. The entire world has watched South Africa make this important transition to a true multiracial democracy. President Nelson Mandela has emerged as a symbol of freedom and dignity on the world stage. He has won a victory for all humanity. He has emerged without any trace of bitterness or hatred toward anyone as he sought leadership of his nation. Unscarred and unbent by his long incarceration, Mr. Mandela gives hope to all people with his victory at the poll. So all around the world, in 1994, as we move toward the 21st century, we are in the midst of a revolution of ideas, a revolution of values. The struggle has been waged in every nation, among every people, by peaceful means, by propaganda, diplomacy, financial pressures, strikes, ballots, and bullets. We have seen men sacrifice truth for a false and negative peace. My friends, all of this bears out the teachings of the ancient Greek philosophers and modern-day scientists who share the view that everything in the universe is in a constant change. Nothing stands still. The beginning becomes the end. Today becomes yesterday. The future becomes the past. The young becomes the old. life becomes death. Ideas become realities, and the old gives way to the new. As I grew up in rural Alabama, I saw for myself the evil of racial segregation and discrimination. An evil system, a way of life, had been built on a foundation of racism, greed, hatred, and the denial of basic human needs and basic human rights. It was a closed society, and everywhere I turn, I find closed doors. The signs of discrimination and segregation were everywhere. I saw those signs that said white men, colored men, white women, colored women, white waiting, colored waiting. There were two different worlds, a white world and a black world. Then it was one of the greatest privileges of my life to witness just 50 miles from my home, in the heart of the Deep South, a bright ray of hope, the birth of the modern-day civil rights movement. It was almost 40 years ago. I was 15 years old in the 10th grade when I first heard of a young minister, saw him on television, a son of America, working for freedom and justice through nonviolence and love. His words stirred me and his action inspired me because he dared to stand up to an oppressive system and to organize and mobilize the black community of Montgomery, Alabama. As I watched this man, I knew that Martin Luther King Jr. was not just speaking for blacks in Montgomery. He was a moral leader, and he was speaking for all humanity. As a student in college, I became part of that movement which Dr. King had inspired. We continue to challenge the system of segregation, which had dominated the lives of black people since the days of slavery. I found myself in a community of people who were willing to disobey social customs and to defy unjust laws. These people were willing to suffer beatings, go to jail, and give their lives for a higher purpose. We had a dream that we could eliminate racism and the division between people. We had a dream that we could build, yes, the beloved community, a community of peace, a community of justice and brotherhood. It was a dream whose time had come. Basic to our dream of the beloved community was the belief that change is possible. The changes which we were brought by our efforts serve to strengthen our faith in the dream. Central to our philosophical concept of the beloved community was an affirmation of our faith in God and our faith in humanity. The willingness to believe that people and all people have the moral capacity to care for his or her fellow man. When we suffer violence and abuse, our concern was not for retaliation. We sought to understand the human condition of our attacker and to accept the suffering with love. While nonviolence for some was merely a tactic for social change, for many of us, it became a philosophy, a way of life, a way of living. As I worked throughout the South during the 60s, I saw civil rights workers and indigenous people whom we were trying to help with their heads cracked open by nightsticks, lying in the streets, weeping from tear gas, calling helplessly for assistance. I saw old women and young children involved in peaceful, nonviolent protests who were run down by policemen on horses, beaten back by fire hoses, and chased by police dogs. Yet these people were still able to forgive, understand, and sing, "Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around." Although I've been beaten, left lying unconscious in the streets of Montgomery in May of 1961, had a concussion in Selma on the bridge in 1965, and locked in jail more than 40 times for participating in nonviolent protests, I must say that I still believe in the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. I strongly believe that means and ends are inseparable. The means by which we struggle must be consistent with the ends we seek. So I say to you, the class of 1994, as leaders of the 21st century, you should keep in mind the words of the educator Horace Mann. He said, "We should be ashamed to die, be ashamed to leave this world until we have made some contribution to humanity." As students, as young people, you have been blessed with good and sensitive teachers and caring and loving families and friends. You have an obligation to give back to the larger community. You must forget about your own circumstances and rise up and get involved with the problem and circumstances of others. Your generation must nurture, cultivate, and provide a type of leadership which will give vision and substance to the building of an all-encompassing world community which respects the needs and humanity of every individual. You have a mandate, you have a mission, and a moral obligation to work for social and economic justice. You have a mandate from the spirit of history to follow in the footsteps of those brave and courageous men and women who passed this way before us. You have a mandate from the masses who have worked together, prayed together, stood up together, sat in together, sang together, were beaten together, and went to jail together. You must become the conscience of your community, of your city, your state, our nation, and our world. You have a mission to create a new agenda for America, to create a better world, and to create the beloved community. Your mission is to use your lives, your time, your talents, and your education to look out for all humankind. All of us must begin where we are, to build bridges of understanding, bridges of compassion, bridges of communication. For too long, we have been divided by race and class. I must tell you, in spite of all of the progress that we've made as a nation, as a people, the scars and stains of racism and discrimination are still deeply embedded in American society. We're still a society divided by race and class. Many of our cities have become unlivable concrete jungles. They have become centers of crime and violence. They have become places of despair. And there's a feeling that race is no longer a central issue. We don't talk about race in America anymore. We need to engage in a very serious dialogue as a nation and as a people, a real debate and a major discussion on the issue of race. As a nation and as a people, we must continue to lay down the burden of race. As we move toward the 21st century, there is a need at the highest level of government for our leaders to summon a national summit on race. Somebody, maybe in the academic community, maybe in the business community, maybe in government, but somebody, someplace should say that we're one nation, one people, one house, one family, the American house, the American family. Let me just say that we are at a very critical point in our nation's history. More than anything, our nation is at a crossroad. Our mission should be to bring people together, speaking a common language and dedicated to a common enterprise, the common good. Beyond the question of race and class, we're forced to address other issues, issues which will determine the quality of life and even whether there will be life on this planet. We have a moral obligation to come together to find a solution to our man-made problems and protect this little planet we call spaceship Earth. This Earth is not ours to hoard and to waste, but to use what we need and leave the rest for unborn generation. As you go forth from the University of New Hampshire, you must be prepared for a long struggle. Frederick Douglass said it best in 1857 when he said, "If there is no struggle, there's no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet appreciate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the roar of its mighty waters. Power conceives nothing without a demand. It never has, and it never will." You have the power to lead. You have the power to change the social, economic, and political structures around you. The power to lead in efforts to bring about a better life for human beings throughout the world. If you use that power, if you continue to pursue a standard of excellence in your daily lives, then the new and better world of which we dream is yours for the building. Those of you who have completed the course realize the value of dreaming dreams and having goals and holding fast to your dream. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., one of our greatest leaders, was also one of our great dreamers. The late Senator Robert F. Kennedy, who sought a new world, was most fond of George Bernard Shaw's words, "Some men see things as they are and say, why? I dream of things that never were and say, why not?" If you, as graduate of the University of New Hampshire, pursue a standard of excellence and keep on working, then your years of study and your years of service to humankind would have not been in vain. If someone had told me when I was marching with Martin Luther King Jr. from Selma to Montgomery, or marching on Washington, or going to jail, that one day I would be in the Congress serving as a Chief Deputy Majority Whip, as a member of the Ways and Means Committee of the House, I would say, "You're crazy, you're out of your mind, you don't know what you're talking about." So I said to you as graduates, don't give up. Don't give in. Don't give out. Hold on and keep your eyes on the prize. May God bless you.
Thank you, Congressman.